All right. Good evening. It's Paul Adams here, and I am here with Shirley Seckham. And we haven't got a name for this yet. Maybe it's Sher and Paul chat about marketing, or we'll come up with something that's probably a little bit more interesting than that. But good to have you here. Hello.
How are you, Paul? Really good
Great.
to be talking about this.
Yeah, it's really good. So this came about because Shirley and I have had a couple of chats over the last, probably 12 months or so since we really kind of first connected. And I think, Shirley works in marketing every day. I love marketing. So it's just something we both have a lot to talk about and agree upon. So I think this is really, really relevant, and it's constantly relevant. It's always relevant in business. But, I love to talk about this. And I think there's just so much in the day-to-day that is so hidden for people that aren't thinking about this sort of stuff all the time, that just even having conversations like this is really, really useful. I get so much out of listening to other marketers talk about marketing. And so I think we're both hoping that just this kind of conversation is of use to people out there. So hopefully it's something that people find useful and get some great value out of. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds great. It's, there's always something new to learn. So yeah, I love it. And I really enjoy the conversations that we have in being, it sort of inspires new directions. So it's good.
I agree. So let's just, I guess, set the scene for anybody that hasn't met or heard of either of us before. So Shirley, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and let's start there.
Okay, well, my company, I work as my own, it's Shirley Seckham, but I started a blog a number of years ago called An Idiot on Stage, which was meant to encourage and equip community theatre primarily, is where it started, to expect more of themselves and to do better. And because of my background in marketing and the work I was doing with community organisations, not-for-profits, I soon found myself working for independent theatre companies around the country as well, because they have very similar needs when it comes to marketing. They have no time, literally no budget, and they're doing everything on their own and little experience in doing all this. So I found that there was a huge crossover. But if theatre has particular needs, that's where my niche is. So whilst I might work for small business as well, I am dedicated to staying in the niche of the arts, in performing arts, in the theatre, because of their need of finding an audience, making connection with their local communities, and getting outside of their theatre contacts in when they come to promoting what they do. I find that theatre creatives tend to promote themselves to other theatre creatives, and I sometimes wonder whether it's out of fear, opening it up. It's really interesting talking to professional theatre creatives who only want to promote their art or their work to their peers, where if you really drill down with them in conversation, you'd find that they'd say, no, I definitely want to take this to my community, but that's not what they do in their marketing. So it's helping them to understand that when the word promotion is not a dirty word, and to help them to understand what that really means for us as creatives in sharing our work, so that we get it outside of our living rooms and performing to mum and dad. Literally, that's what it is. So I've spent the last 10 years finding ways of breaking down the standard marketing strategy to suit not-for-profits who don't have the time, money, or experience, and finding what really, really must be done to make an impact, build an online presence, take advantage of, this wonderful online marketing that we have, especially at the moment.
Yes.
But helping them to be able to do that just for theatre. Yeah. So I find there's a lot of crossover actually to small business, because it's all storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
totally agree.
as a theatre professional myself, as a theatre creative, and as a storyteller, I find that informs a lot of my marketing, and that's what I bring to the table.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I'll come back to something you said in a second. And that's great. And I think there's just so much you've said there in itself that's worth really talking about. So just a bit of background on myself. For those that don't know, I am kind of a multi kind of level artist across theatre and film. So I work as an actor and a producer and a writer and a director. So I'm one of those creative slashies, is what I get referred to as by some people. And I started producing theatre because I needed something to perform in. I started in amateur circles in medieval reenactment kind of groups and was creating sort of a lot of Shakespeare work and historic texts, converting stories and poems from different periods into scripts and performing them at big medieval feasts and that kind of stuff. That's where I really cut my teeth on Shakespeare and classic texts, which I still love deeply to this day. But yeah, over the years have produced a lot of stuff for other people and stuff for myself and never made any money out of it, always ran at a loss. And a couple of years ago had a real epiphany about actually taking the business skills that I have, because most of my non-arts work has always been in management through retail and the arts and that sort of thing, but always in management and leadership positions. And so I've got a good understanding of business and a head for commerce, and I enjoy that. I actually had to come to terms with the fact that I actually love that as well, and realized I really should be actually combining the two of those to actually turn what I love to do into something that can help me earn a living as well. And so that's where I pivoted my entire focus on, to actually trusting that my art was good, because I had enough evidence to support that that was the case through audience reaction, feedback, comments from people that aren't just my family, and trusting that the art that we create will be quality enough, and focusing my effort on actually building a business around that. And so that's where I've come out and really been pushing for the last couple of years, about really focusing on applying those business mechanisms and building the business around the art that I do, rather than going, well, here's a business, how do I do art within it? It's actually looking at it the other way around. And it really came to light for me when I was the general manager of the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble, because when I went in there to do that role, they were very passionate about not jeopardizing the art and the way that they did the art. And they didn't want the business systems to dictate how the art was created. And so I said, no, that's fine. 100% here to support the art. And so let's build the systems around what's actually already happening and make it viable. And so we did that. We placed a big focus on that. The entire team came together. We doubled the income of the company in a couple of years, about 4 or 5 years. I think we saw it double, which was amazing. And I went, I think it's time for me to do this for myself. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I love arts. I love theatre. I love acting. I love creating, and I love commerce. And I have no fear in the two of those things living in the same world. I think they should go together. Shakespeare did it, so I think it's all right for us. Yeah.
I think you bring up a really interesting, or you raise a really interesting point that I come across a lot in promotion of theatre or individual theatre companies, and the mistake they make, which underlines everything they do. They feel that they need to promote to everybody in the world, and it makes it really, really difficult when you're they're basically trying to please everybody in their marketing.
Yeah.
And it's the biggest mistake they make. The best thing that I can try and convince an artist of is to be unique, a theatre company to be truly who they are, because it's like throwing everything into a sieve and shaking it down, and what is left is your audience. When we fall into the mistake of trying to please everyone and be everything to everybody in our market, even in theatre, the theatre that your particular theatre company does is not for the entire market. You Absolutely. Have a particular audience, and it's knowing who that is and being comfortable in serving that particular audience and giving them what they want that will open doors enormously. But it's such a common thing, and small business does it as well in marketing. Yeah. And when you try to serve everybody in your marketing, you serve no one, and you become bland, boring, and beige.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
It's the biggest mistake people can make.
Yeah, let's break that down a bit more. I think that is an amazing place to start. And I had a conversation with someone once where, I think the classic thing is that we believe that what we create is worth everyone looking. Everybody would enjoy it, and that may be true. But I had a conversation with somebody where they actually said, "Oh, I said, who's your audience? Who are you trying to target and trying to get to?" "Oh, it's kind of for everyone." I said, "Okay, cool. So what do the 6-year-olds think of it?" "Oh, well, they don't. It's not really. So it's not for everyone." "What do the 80-year-old fundamental Christians think of it?" "Oh, well, I wouldn't think they'd come." So it's not for everyone. And I mean, I know they're quite extremes, but that's the whole point. Is it isn't for everybody. Everything that we create is not for everybody. Shakespeare, which I love, is not for everybody. And it is for lots of different people. And I think this is the problem that people kind of get stuck in their mind. I totally agree with you that we want to target our marketing and really focus that in and focus the messaging. That's not to say that it's only ever to one group of people. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. But we need to be able to identify those types of groups, in my opinion, and target them all differently. Because the conversation, I mean, let's take Shakespeare as a great example. The conversation you're going to have with somebody who loves Shakespeare because of the language is probably going to need a different targeted message to somebody who loves Shakespeare because of the history, or somebody that loves Shakespeare because of the bawdiness or how risque it can be. So there's all this wide range of people that do love Shakespeare, but if you try and talk to all of them in one message, you're actually not going to hit the mark with any of them. Do you agree? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. And that's a form of marketing that says, this is what I want to say, you have to listen, rather than hearing what your audience wants or how they see who you are and responding. It's like acting. You're meant to be listening and responding. So if you approach your marketing the way you, well, people tend to, we all do it. We tend to market to ourselves because that's what we understand.
Yeah, nice.
So if you are like me, a marketer in her 50s, then, and I'm marketing, for instance, Spring Awakening, let's say. Okay. Now, I love Spring Awakening, but if I market it as my demographic understands or generally approaches Spring Awakening, rather than the demographic that would really respond to it, then I'm going to be probably approaching Spring Awakening in the way Julie Andrews would. So it's listening, knowing who your market is even for a particular show. So
when you say that you would approach it the way that Julie Andrews would approach it, what is that approach? What do you mean when you say that?
It's gentle, it's sanitized, it's sweet and lovely. Spring Awakening is none of those things. Spring Awakening is raw and real and wonderful.
And are you kind of suggesting that by doing that, you're playing to the audience that reflects who you personally connect with, as opposed to who the show is really there to connect with? Is that?
I'm saying that if you were promoting Spring Awakening, if I was promoting Spring Awakening, I would need to understand Spring Awakening. I would need to understand its themes, and I would need to promote it from that perspective, rather than and understanding the basic demographic that would love Spring Awakening, working with mediums that they love, in language that they respond to, with tactics, particularly social media, that they would respond to, rather than clean, tidy. It's thinking of themes that
the marketing then reflects the style and flavor of the show.
Absolutely. So that means that your marketing is changing all the time. When you're working with a theatre company, there are always two brands or two lines of branding that happen, and that is the one for the theatre company and the one for whatever show you're doing at the time, and they run concurrently. So the mistake that I see theatre companies make all the time is they market the same way across everything. But there's only one line of marketing, and it's always promotional and advertising.
Yeah.
So they never tell me who they are, what they think, show me behind the scenes. It's always buy tickets. And
Gotcha.
so that their marketing becomes the same and predictable, regardless of the show they're doing. And they end up whoever's doing the marketing at the time, markets to themselves. You can tell who's marketing whatever theatre company it is based on what they're doing. It's safe. It tends to be safe. Nothing is disruptive. And disruption is the biggest tool that you have in your marketing arsenal for a theatre company. And it's predictable. I hate predictability in marketing.
Well, it's not going to stop someone scrolling either. I mean, we know that everything at the moment is, scrolling through. And if what you're doing from a marketing perspective doesn't jump off the screen and grab someone's attention, they're not going to look at it. It's just going to be another piece of whitewash that moves on past.
Exactly. You need to have courage. I like to explain disruption as being in a cafe. You're standing in a cafe and you want to attract attention. And so you're going to do something that is completely out of the social acceptable norms. You're going to stand on a table and you're going to dance. So everybody in that cafe, you haven't done anything to offend anybody. You haven't said anything to offend anyone. You haven't done anything like that. But you've done something that is very disruptive in that it makes you noticed. It's just not done, as in it's not what everyone is expecting. So if you can liken your marketing strategy to dancing on a table in a cafe, that's what disruption is. But most people don't do that. It's scary.
So can you give me an example of what that might look like in practical terms? So let's go back to your Spring Awakening example then.
Okay.
If you were marketing Spring Awakening, what is something that you could do from a marketing point of view that would have that sort of disruptive kind of effect?
Okay, off the top of my head.
Put you on the spot.
Okay, so what you would traditionally see would be lovely, beautifully designed poster or hero image, something that was, looked attractive. That's lovely. We're going to introduce the cast to you. So we'll have their headshots and their bios. That would come through drip fed at a time. We'd have, now here's where you can buy your tickets. I see nothing else. So disruption would be, let's take a look at the themes of it. You might, you definitely go behind the scenes, but, you might, let me see, you might grab a particular theme, maybe the headmaster. Let's go there.
Yep.
And explore someone. Oh, this is really hard, Paul. It takes a lot of thinking to put this through.
Well, I think that in itself is a really great point, that it's going to take time to come up with some kind of strategy that is going to have an effect. And I think that's the other thing you see a lot. And tell me if I'm wrong. Do you see a lot of marketing campaigns kind of just thrown together at the end? And there's not a lot of depth in it?
People tend to go straight for what I call the tactics, which is the fun stuff of social media. So it's the latest, do a TikTok and throw it into, Facebook or whatever. It's their tactics. And that's where people tend to start because it's what they know, and fair enough. Whereas they really need to go back to the strategy, which is the plan as to why you're doing, what you want to achieve with it, and how you're going to do that. It means that most people tend to shotgun. So they'll throw everything they can at the wall, hoping that something sticks. Unfortunately, that takes all their time, and they're busy enough as it is, because these are generally the people who are doing the show as well. Yeah,
true.
So they're spending so much time, and it's not really having any impact, or the impact that it could have, because there's no plan to it. So they're not directing people to subscribing to an email list. They're not directing people. There's no plan to anything at all. There's no correct hashtags that have been research to find out whether they're ones that actually work or connected to things they really don't want to be connected to.
Good point.
Yeah, that's some really interesting stories. It's the way to run, they run competitions. They haven't researched how Facebook says you have to run competitions, and they put themselves at risk by doing the old like and share on a Facebook competition, which is against the rules.
Yeah.
They can have themselves shut down, all sorts of things. So a little bit of planning goes a long way. It can reduce their workload. and actually what they throw at social media or their marketing have a longer term effect, rather than just marketing their current show. When that show is finished, they're no further ahead as a theatre company.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And something that just sort of came to mind when you're talking about that is, again, that sense of, I think we're also, as creators, generally quite impatient. Is that we put so much time and effort and energy into the creation, into the creative process, into the show. I mean, for us, it's theatre or film. We're putting so much thought and process into how we're going to create that, and so little time into how we're going to get people aware of it. And ultimately, for me, that's kind of how I define marketing. It's just about building awareness. And I think that has to happen over time. My experience has been that unless you've got a lot of money to really throw at something, which, you know, a lot of us as indie artists and not-for-profit companies just don't have, I think we definitely need to really think about that longer-term strategy and building an audience over time, and not being so impatient. And I will be the first to admit that I am one of the most impatient people in the world when it comes to this sort of thing. I hate the slow build. I hate it. I just get it done. But, you know, just even in the experience of the last couple of years of trying to build my own audience, it takes so long. It takes so long if you don't have a lot of cash to throw behind it. You know, I'm bootstrapping my business. It's all growing out of my pocket. And so I've got to be very strategic about how I'm doing that. And the thing that really came to mind that kind of brought all of that out for me is that sense of a phrase that I actually heard through YouTube circles, because I've got the YouTube show, and it's "the riches are in the niches." And that if we actually really, like, say you're doing Spring Awakening and you don't have a massive budget, I'm thinking, and I'm actually even thinking this now for myself, because I hadn't really put this on paper before, but I'm actually thinking a better ploy, a better strategy would be to pick the single target market that I'm going to get the biggest bang for my buck out of in regards to response for that specific show, and focus all of my marketing on that one target market in the hopes that it brings a lot of people in that specific kind of targeted market to the show. They're going to bring their friends and family and whatever if they're interested. They will help kind of spread the word of the show. But then I'm really getting the best bang for my dollar in the spend on my marketing budget. Would you say that's a good approach?
Yeah, it comes back to those two lines of branding or marketing happening all the time. There is so much choice. Now, we live in Brisbane. There is so much choice for people to choose for theatre that you cannot compete based on the show you do, because people have, on any Friday night, dozens of things to choose from. So if you're, for a theatre company to compete on the show is like a business competing on price. You will always lose. If they're looking at a choice of, say, half a dozen things on a Friday night to go and see, here's the way they tend to break it down. It's an emotional purchase. Like anything that we purchase, it's always based on emotion.
Yep.
So if you have spent the last 6 months building a relationship with your audience so they know who you are and allowed them to follow you on your journey, you're already ahead of people or a theatre company with a show that they've never heard of the theatre company. They know nothing about them. The show looks interesting, but if they're looking at 6 things, price comes into it a little bit. But they're going to always navigate or give some favor to the theatre company or the people that they know and have an online relationship with that will influence their purchasing decision. So that's why it's always, you're always building your theatre company's brand or brand awareness.
Yeah, that's good.
Regardless of the show you do, because any theatre company tends to choose a genre or a style of show that is representative of the founders of the company. And that's great. So it's not a case of marketing the show. I see so many people that start a Facebook page or their social media in the name of the show.
Oh, I see that too. Yeah,
I know. And so they get all these followers for that Facebook page for, let's say, Chicago, which is great. But then at the end of that show, those followers, that audience is lost and they have to start all over again because they built the relationship based on the show. Or if you try and move them across onto
another page, you're going to lose a lot of them. You might get a few to come over, but it's nowhere near what you would want.
No.
Such a great point.
You're always building the relationship with you as a theatre company, showing who you are, what you do behind the scenes. And in amongst that is also the show of the time.
Yeah.
And that's why you can then build relationship with your local geographic community and you must be offline as well.
Yeah.
You've got to have that, building that relationship with who you are as a theatre company, not just the show. And that is long term. The shorter run up or lead time you have to opening night, the more expensive it will be because you have to buy Facebook advertising, which now is a little cheaper, but just
now
before
it is.
COVID, the real estate on Facebook advertising now is so limited, it's very expensive.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
You know, you have to do it yourself because if you have less than $500 a month to spend, you cannot afford an agency to do it for you. And that's very risky.
And $500 outright is what some people are trying to spend on marketing total, which is never going to get you anywhere. So I really love that. I'm curious about, at the moment, I mean, let's segue a little bit into kind of branching off a little bit about the current situation. Obviously, COVID is happening. A lot of theatre is not happening right now. What are you seeing companies out there doing to stay connected with their audience? So if
Nothing.
I was wondering about that.
It is really, really hard because you've got a couple of things to factor in here. And you've got the impact on the founders or the creators of the theatre company themselves. They're dealing with the emotional impact of this as much as anybody else is.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but for a little while it shut me down. It was just sort of like, I don't know what to do with this. And it's only been in the last, say, 3 weeks that I've got my old self back. Before that, it was sort of like, I just don't want to know. I don't want to know. It's just too hard. Yeah. So that's the first thing. There was nothing to prepare us for this. There's no playbook for this at all. And there is not a person in this earth that can tell you how this is going to, what outcomes is going to be. We're all playing it by ear. Yeah. But now there is this fear, and I think I've said this to you before, there's this sense now where we are coming to the point where we're all a little bored with what we've been doing. And having adjusted, there is now, I know certainly for myself, a sense of, I want to get started again, but you cannot just jump back into what we were doing pre-COVID.
No, absolutely.
It's everything you do has to have an ear for how people are responding and still are responding.
Yeah.
And you speak through the lens of COVID, but it's the perfect time to be introducing your theatre company, probably as most theatre companies have not done in the past because they've been so busy promoting their show, but introducing who you are, what you think, even what your everyday life is like as a founder or producer of a theatre company. You can't talk about shows, but you can talk about the future. I think there's an opportunity here to start doing and developing relationship.
Yeah, I think that's really key for me. I mean, I'm A, the eternal optimist, and B, the opportunist. And it's interesting to hear you say that you were shut down for a little while trying to come to terms with it all. And I think that's probably a reflection of anybody that actually had a business that was their income. My theatre and my producing and that kind of stuff at the moment is still very much the side hustle, and it's not earning me the income yet that is compensating for, is funding my life. So I didn't feel that impact of shutting down. I mean, I've got a show that we were in production for that we were looking to produce in September. That's probably not going to happen now. And we'll have to postpone into next year sometime. So obviously there's the frustration of that. But again, being the opportunist, I'm actually looking at that as an opportunity to really focus on growing the email list and getting that audience on my books before I need them to buy a ticket. And so that's where my whole focus shifted very, very quickly when I realized what was happening. So, and the other thing, I guess, for me is that I don't see myself as just a theatre company. I took a turn when I really sort of took this bend into kind of pivoting it to the business focus, trusting the art will be good. I decided as well that I needed to be online and offline, that I needed to, I set myself 5 rules of how, sort of innovation comes from limitation. And we're seeing a lot of that happen now around a lot of software that's being developed and a lot of processes that people are doing. But I knew that before from my business stuff. And so I set myself 5 limiting rules to produce by. And one of those was that it had to, whatever I produced had to have the potential for a global reach, because I knew that that's where the future was going. And so I kind of took a bit of a spin and became, in my mind, an entertainment company, not just a theatre company. And so I didn't feel like I had that shutdown, but I did feel like I needed to pivot very quickly. And so moved very quickly into producing some stuff online. And I was already working that way because we are heading up to Easter, and we're kind of, with the shows that we're creating, we're doing those digital download packs as an extra, kind of like a workshop pack that you would get in a school. We're creating those as an extra add-on for the shows for parents to be able to purchase as an add-on. Again, just trying to drive something that's going to build income. But I realized that I can create those without a show. And so I did a Christmas one, and then I did an Easter one. And I actually released the Easter one for free to parents. So the Easter pack was designed for the target market that my next show was going to serve, which is kids in the primary school age group. And so target it to mums with kids in primary school, and 5x'd my mailing list. Now, that sounds really great as a percentage. When I say that, I started with like 60 people. It's now 250. So, or maybe not 5x, maybe 4x. But yeah, so I think it's that sense of taking that opportunity and moving with it. So there is a lot of theatre companies out there now that are not doing anything, but there are some people doing amazing stuff. Like there's the Little Red Company who've partnered with Australian Event Productions and Aruga and, all of the artists that they know, and doing the ISO Late Show, which is just amazing. Like what they're pulling together with the resources they have, and people are just giving, and it's just incredible. And I think the thing that fascinates me the most is that as independent artists, we are often working for very little or no income. And yet, right now, while there's an opportunity for us to have the eyeballs of so many people with a little bit of extra focus, that we aren't seeing a lot more stuff being created online to draw people in and get them on our email lists and build our audience up in this moment. I'm fascinated by that, and that's really where I'm looking, is this is a massive opportunity right now. Yes, it's a frustration. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's frustrating as hell to not be able to put on the show. And, obviously very sad that so many people have been, pushed out of work, lost work. Shows like Carriage Works, I think, just went into receivership, voluntary receivership. There's so much horrible that's going to come out of this. But we have to stay positive just as humans, because the world turns like this all the time. We can't control anything that's going to happen. And if we don't put a focus on being positive and looking for the opportunities, all you end up doing is seeing people wallow. And I'm seeing so much of that at the moment. It's like, oh, woe is me and woe is this. And I'm like, I couldn't live like that. I just couldn't.
I think that's a really good point for leaders within the industry. It's not everyone is set up to be able to lead, I guess, to be the one that stands up and says, well, that's enough. I'm doing what I put out into the world is going to be positive. It's not, and that doesn't mean not acknowledging what's going on. It means acknowledging it and deciding to still be positive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a place for, especially, in our presence online, that place for that authenticity. But within that authenticity is that that willingness to be vulnerable and be be positive in what we put out. I see that within my circles, there's some very talented people like, Little Red and the likes, but there's Show Tunes Tuesday, it's James Lee and Samara Marinelli, and what was a Tuesday night in the city, putting that online in whatever form that was.
Yeah.
And you see all these various little individuals popping up and recording and putting product up there online. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone is up for that. But yeah, it's been amazing to watch, as you say, the willingness to give.
Yeah.
For people, as I say, people who have lost their income completely, and yet they're still giving, which says a lot about the industry, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, the thing, I think it's amazing. I mean, lost for words. It is amazing to see what some of these guys are doing. I'm just surprised that there aren't more independent artists who need to build an audience, who need to get some kind of awareness around the work that they're doing, not seeing that as the opportunity for them right now as well. And I would love to see more. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I think, even if it's like, we're going to actually do a live stream of the play that we were going to perform. We're going to live stream that so that we can, use that as an opportunity to engage with the audience and build the mailing list a little bit through that. So we'll set that up behind some kind of opt-in where people have to register like they would be buying a ticket. It'll be free, but I still want them to register so we can get their name on our email list, so that when we do go to do the show, we've got a bigger chance of, filling the house. There you go. That's what we can call this segment: selling out without selling out.
I think this response to COVID highlights something that I've thought for some time, and that is that the industry, I mean, you've got your large organizations with funding and, can pay a marketing company or professionals and do all that sort of thing. But the majority of the industry isn't that.
Yes, 100%.
So many of us are independents. If you've got an independent theatre company, for instance, I have a client in Melbourne, there's two people. These people are highly trained and highly viewed in the industry, but it's two people. So just to say you're a professional independent theatre company doesn't help when it comes to the fact that they're not necessarily going to have the business training. And I think that is something that I see lacking in the industry, is this approach to our creativity on the business level. How do we take this and earn a living from it? It's all about I had a client say to me once, a little independent theatre company say to me that they didn't want to, they wanted to promote this show only to their peers. And a little while down, I challenged that. And a little while down the track, they came back to me and said, how do I promote to my community?
Yeah, excellent.
But I can't figure out if it was fear of putting that work out there. I'm surely not, because these are, very highly regarded people. And the show was, a Pulitzer Prize winner. It was just,
wow.
But it's this, and community theatre does it as well. We tend to promote to other creatives.
Yeah, it's a comment you made right at the start of this conversation that I wanted to come back to. So I'm glad it's kind of gone full circle back to there, because I'm curious about that. And I think you're right. I think, and look, I think I've been guilty of it. You tell your friends, and the people you hang out with are generally the people doing the same sort of thing as you. So but we don't focus on that, getting the word out wider in a field. Yeah. Any theories as to what that is, why that is? Why
I think it's like that? Knowledge. It's like a training in marketing.
Yeah,
it really is.
Makes sense.
Why else would you think? Why do we get into this? We get into this because we love our art.
Yeah.
We want to, produce. We want to act. We don't think far enough ahead. Oh, well, this is going to take some business and administrative knowledge. I'm going to have to market this. That's not where our heads are at. Our heads are on the stage, in the theatre. Fair enough. That's what it is. We go there. That's what we love to do. Unfortunately, if you want to be able to perform outside of your living room and beyond your mum and dad, you'd have to train, you have to skill up. But theatre companies, whether they be community, volunteer-run organisations to small independents, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And so it doesn't happen. And you resort to what you know, which is going back to that idea of tactics on social media, which is not enough. And I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm learning all the time. I'm training all the time to stay up to date with things that change constantly. Yeah. How can you ask a creative who is doing the same thing in their art to spend just as much time on the marketing of their theatre? So I think that's what it is. It's just no idea of what to do. And so you go and you tell mum and dad, you ask your peers, come and see my show. And there is this huge, massive, untapped market. They say there's no one buying tickets. Well, you haven't told them. You have not told them that the show is on. You think you have, but you have not told that huge, untapped market out there in the world of people who don't do the theatre, but they love theatre. Yeah. But they don't know you exist. You know you exist. So if I know I exist, that means the rest of the world does. Yeah. That's how we think.
Well, look, let's finish our conversation with a little bit of a chat around that tonight, because if we don't decide that we're going to end this soon, because we'll talk all night. What are some things that we can do as independent artists outside of promoting a show and outside of just those social media tactics? What are the things that we can do? Let's brainstorm a few of those things, or you might have some off the top of your head. What are the things that we can do to grow our audience and build awareness for what we do?
I think some of the things that I find is making connections within your local community. For instance, you'll have a home base. So you have a local councillor for your city council. You have a state member. Your local councillor is bound to have a newsletter that goes out to all their constituents. They want to support their local theatre company. You have Facebook groups, for instance, that are for your suburbs or surrounding suburbs with thousands of people on them. You have other organisations. You probably, for instance, if you're living in Brisbane, you've got numerous arts organisations that are locally based. That you can become part of, arts councils, all these sorts of things. Now, on the surface, they sound dinky and small, but you have no idea where these things go. There are directories. There's so many of these things. There are schools, making connections with drama departments in schools. PNCs. There are local large businesses with HR departments that have social clubs. You have your local services clubs, numerous ones of those that are all looking for somewhere to take large groups to the theatre. You have the Red Hat Ladies. All these organisations.
Forgotten about them. I'm going to write that down.
I know.
I'd forgotten all about them.
Massive, massive markets that take time.
Yeah.
But, and you're building a media pack or a community pack, a documentation that this is comes back to part of your marketing and how you present yourself. But what large companies are in your city or your suburb or whatever that you can approach to say, look, we put on theatre. We would love to offer your social club or a charity, local charity, a local aged seniors, huge, Senior Life magazine, all these sorts of things. Look, we'll do a group booking. You can local seniors club. You can come to our final dress rehearsal. We'll make it an open dress rehearsal, and we will charge you a vastly, a discounted amount of the ticket, and you can charge the full amount and keep the rest for charity or for your, all that sort of thing. It's thinking outside the box other than it's opening night or nothing. It's, and it's, and it depends on how many seats, whether you're working to, 50 seats or a 500 seat theatre. It's the same principles on a different scale, but there are so many other things that you can do that you're building long-term relationships with too, rather than the one-off thing of selling tickets for that one show. If you go and build a relationship with a local HR department in a big business, that's an ongoing relationship you can go and revisit over and over and build subscribers, group bookers, that can be, 30% of your ticket sales before you've even opened the doors.
Yeah,
so it's thinking longer term rather than the immediate. But that takes time.
Let's take a couple of those, the social clubs, for instance. What are the different ways that you would think that are good to connect with them? Obviously, you can offer them discounts on group bookings and that kind of thing. Is there more to it than that?
Well, it depends on who it is and what you're doing. It's a bit like dating. And your marketing's a bit like dating. You don't walk into, say, a barbecue and walk up to a group of people and say, I'm in a theatre company, buy my tickets. They don't give a rat's about who you are. You are getting to know them. So this is where social media really can go beyond you just posting buy tickets. This is you joining these local groups, these suburbs, making contact with the page, or actually posting something that is relevant to their members and tagging them in. It's building a slow relationship so that they become aware of that you exist, and B, who you are. You're telling the story. And then it's doing your research and finding a contact, making direct contact with that person, explaining who you are, and that, you'd love to talk to them about what you can, this is what we can do, this is what we offer. I think there's an opportunity to have a coffee and see whether there's something we can do mutually together. It's networking. On a marketing level. It's slow. This is why this is long term. But these are the sorts of relationships that are going to build a solid foundation for you, far better and longer term, that will keep giving. They'll just keep on giving.
Yeah. So probably good to start with, obviously just one or two of those to target to start with, and start to play with that and talk to them and build that relationship, rather than try and go out and do 50 for a show. Understand that it's going to be something that you want to build relationships over the long term. You're going to do this slowly. And
don't underestimate starting small and starting local. So if
agree.
You are somewhere, let's say I live in Manly. So I would start with the local RSL club, or the local schools, the local whatever. Starting local, the local newspaper. Now, Quest newspapers. No, it doesn't matter that no one reads print newspaper. It does not matter, because you've got syndication if the story is good enough, goes beyond there. But for some reason, here it is, you can get a photo and a little editorial in your local rag that no one reads, gets tossed straight in the bin. When we're talking about the print, a certain demographic will, but there is a legitimacy that comes from having something in the newspaper, regardless of who reads it and where, whether it's online or in print, that you can repurpose. So nothing is lost.
That's an important word there. So if you get an image and a little bit of an editorial story, whatever, in the paper that no one reads, how do you get to leverage that? You just talked about repurposing it.
Social media. Yeah. So you take that, you are building relationship with the journalist that did the story to begin with. Never, always respect that, never underestimate it. So you would repurpose that story. You keeping an eye out for that. There's the story. So you copy that link straight into your social media, thanking the journalist for their time, and the newspaper, and check out whatever magazines, digital magazines, all these sorts of things there's an enormous number of things that are out there, and repurposing it to your social media, because it gives you credibility, a subconscious credibility to an audience, regardless of whether they saw it in the newspaper or not.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
There is actually a lot more out there available to a marketer than people realize.
What would you say, let's finish with this, couple of things that people don't think about, though. What other things that they miss that are out there that they don't think about?
I think they don't think about.
Put you on the spot again.
Local events.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think through my process. There's local events. There is local cafes. Know who your audience is and where they spend their time. So, for instance, if you're doing, a show for children, Who are you marketing to? You're not marketing to the children, you're marketing to the
parents.
Mainly the mother. And I'll tell you a secret, the majority of tickets, particularly in musical theatre in Brisbane, are purchased by women at 35 to 55 years old. There's your demographic.
Yep.
So, but let's go back to the children. It's the mothers. Where do mothers hang out? Well, they're at school. They're at childcare centres. They're at cafes. They're at gymnasiums. They're in PNCs. They're in all sorts of things. Think about where the mother is spending her time, and what can you do to leverage them being there. So if you have a cafe or even a doctor's surgery, let's go to the cafe. A popular cafe in your local area, the area that you want to hit. So what do you do when you go to the cafe and you're a mum, you're escaping from time? You might spend time with friends, certainly. So you could put some DLs in there and do all that sort of thing. But, you know, from speaking from personal, you know, when you're trying to escape and you're going there for the coffee by yourself, you pull out a magazine that they have there. So what do you do? So you supply some of the latest, series of half a dozen of the latest magazines, interior decorating, doing whatever. And on the front, you have a label stuck to it, you know, supplied by whatever theatre company, come see our show, is on the front of the magazine. So everyone who reads that magazine, now, A, that is disruptive because it's not normal.
That's clever.
B, everyone's going to see it. And,
it's going on, you know,
she's pulled it. Yeah, that's right. So it's thinking, who is my audience? Where are they? And how can I serve them? Service is another thing that comes into it. I've served that mum by giving her, you know, a nice, clean, fresh magazine that's not ripped to shreds.
Yeah.
And that cafe is extremely popular. Hundreds of people go through it in a week, you know. So if I'm going to put $30 of magazines in there once a month, that's, you know, it's a simple thing, but multiplied out.
If that converts to ticket sales, you've made your money back. You know, I mean,
yeah, that's exactly right.
Clever. That's a really great idea. And I think it comes down to finding ways to provide service because, you know, and value. We've talked about that before. That is I've never even thought of that. That's that's next level thinking.
Yeah, that's right. Collaboration with a cafe that does a lot of takeaway. Have a look at what it costs to have a sleeve on a takeaway coffee cup, that sort of thing. You know, what sort of collaboration, build a relationship. That's what it is.
Brilliant. So, that's really clever. All right. That's a really great point to end. I think that's a strong, something that someone could actually take away and really think about applying themselves. And now is a great time to be building your mindset around what those opportunities are and starting to build those relationships. I think it's, you know, while people have got a little bit less happening at the moment, I think people
while they're not distracted by having to sell tickets.
Yeah. I think it's
concentrate
genius.
Concentrate on building relationship.
The magazine labels, that's fantastic. That's just blown my mind. That's next level thinking. I love it. So there's two really clever ones for cafes: providing magazines with a label on it that you've supplied it, and looking at what the cost of getting coffee cup sleeves printed. Because, I mean, they're, you know, obviously they're an expense, but, you know, it could be potentially part of your ongoing marketing expense. So that's really clever. I love it. Brilliant. Oh, good chat.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about.
I know. I'm excited. So I hope we get the chance to do this kind of weekly and make a thing of it, because I think there's so much to dig into. And I think, you know, a conversation like this that brings out two golden gems like that, awesome. So that's fantastic. All right.
Next time I want to talk about photos.
All right, cool. Let's do that.
Marketing assets. Let's throw it on the list sometime.
Yeah. Well, let's talk marketing assets on the next episode of. Now, I've got to ask you a question. You sign off your emails with SHER. Is it share? Is it share?
Share.
Share.
Yeah, because my full name's Sherilee, and it just became easier. Share. Great. At rehearsals. Share.
Love it. I just didn't want to pronounce it wrong. And I'm like, sort of see you in a lace onesie at some point with a big wig.
Never.
Love it. All right. Thank you. Good chat.
Good chat to you. Yeah.
Right. Let's end it there, and we'll catch up next week.
Good stuff.
All right. See ya. And everyone out there, share it with your friends. I don't know if any.